The loss of the brigantine Rupert, 24th of December 1895. As a great easterly storm struck the country on Christmas Eve 1895, the Rupert from Faversham in Kent and laden with coal from Sunderland was smashed by two massive waves at 11:45 a.m. as she rounded the South Pier in force 11 winds. She then laboured stern heavy into the harbour when she foundered on the bar and capsized stern first after being deluged by a third huge wave. This was just after the remaining men on board had taken refuge in the rigging. All 7 men were lost. The tragedy occurred in front of thousands of onlookers as the TVLB stood mustered on the rocks with breeches buoy and rockets ready to fire had the ship come aground, which it had looked certain to do. The alarm guns had been fired shortly before the ship overturned. The wrecked hull of the Rupert was then driven onto the Battery Rocks. 3 lifeboats were immediately launched, but no bodies were found. 3 bodies were later washed ashore and taken to the mortuary on the Haven. This is how the Times reported it the following day. Loss of a schooner and 7 lives. During the gale on the northeast coast during Monday night and yesterday, huge waves frequently drove against the new lighthouses on the Tyne piers and at times completely hid them from view. And there were too frequent showers of rain and sleet. Yesterday morning, several vessels safely entered the Tyne harbour, their progress being watched by thousands of people. About 11 o'clock, the passenger steamer Bernicia, which trades between Newcastle and Leith, entered the harbour in safety, but shortly before noon, a disaster involving the loss of several lives occurred. A schooner was seen making for the harbour and, when between the piers, she was struck by a heavy sea and driven upon the outer edge of the Black Middens, facing the Spanish battery at the Tynemouth. The alarm guns were fired at once, and the lifeboat Forester, stationed at Tynemouth, was launched. There was a rush of people to the scene, but nothing could be done for the hapless crew. The man at the wheel was seen to leave his post and make his way to the rigging, where the other men had already taken refuge, but the vessel no sooner struck than she capsized, and nothing more was seen of the crew. The Tynemouth Volunteer Life Brigade mustered in force and prepared the rocket apparatus. A body was afterwards washed ashore. It was that of a young man about 20 years of age. He had on a lifebelt and oilskins, but there was nothing about the body by which it could be identified. The remains were removed to the mortuary in Tynemouth Haven. It has been ascertained that the vessel was the Rupert of Faversham. She was commanded by Captain Burden and carried a crew of 7 hands, all of whom were drowned. The ill-fated schooner left Sunderland on Sunday, last bound for Ramsgate, coal-laden, and she was running into the Tyne for shelter when the accident occurred. The vessel appeared at first to be likely to strike the South Pier, but the hurricane carried her over to the north side. When the ship struck, several of the crew were seen to take to the rigging, but when she went over on her broadside, the masts were carried away and, of course, the unfortunate crew went with them. Other vessels continued to run to the port for safety, and there were no sailings. End quote. A public fund was set up for the families of the crew, and the bodies were buried at Preston Cemetery on the 29th of December, with thousands taking part in a 2-mile procession from Tynemouth Front Street to the cemetery. Interred: Captain Thomas Barden, Whitstable; R.J. Mackenzie, Folkestone; Edward Connor, Queenstown; David Muir, Arbroath. Not recovered: G.H. Yardley, Birmingham; William Fleet, Ramsgate; Harry Safari, Lower Stormouth. Thank you to Brigade Chairman and historian John Wright for help in curating this information. The Tynemouth Volunteer Life Brigade needs support in order to continue their vital work keeping people safe on our shorelines. Please consider a donation to them.